we're recording. So, oops. Where do I have to sit? Over here. um, well.
So what were you saying, Fran? What were you saying?
I was saying that I think part of the issue with kind of passing the faith on is not just kind of making as palatable a version of what you're expecting people to believe as possible, but also to live as virtuous a life as possible. And I think like if you are not living a virtuous life, you still can pass the faith on. But if you're having trouble passing the faith on, and you're trying to figure out how to fix it, probably like trying to make things more palatable versus like, being a better, role model or like whatever, that's kind of where I would see the burden is on you as the parent more than what you're being asked to pass on.
Yeah, I mean, so you have in the church to be a member in good standing, there are certain requirements.
Yeah.
And they're really not that hard.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
being in a state of grace isn't even one of them. Like,
yeah,
that's just, it's understood that members of the church are going to be a full-fledged believing member.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean you're going to be anything close to perfect.
Yeah.
Yet.
Yeah.
But so there's pretty minimal requirements in that, and I would just say that when it comes to what we expect each other and our children and people we meet
mm-hmm.
to believe
mm-hmm.
should be minimal. It should be
because
that's so. Just because you require a certain a certain minimum doesn't mean that the rest of it isn't available to you. Just because you have to go to Mass once a week and on holy days of obligation doesn't mean you don't get the rosary and the devotions and all the extra stuff, some of which may or may not even be good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's just there, and it's permitted. So I guess to me it's like things like, how am I going to interpret this part of the Old Testament? Or if the more permissive we can be,
mm-hmm.
the less of a stumbling block to more people we can be. So if somebody if somebody is interested in and could fulfill the basic requirements of like believing in the creed and just believing that the Catholic Church is the true church instituted by Christ and being obedient to the basic requirements, then that should be a green light and a celebrated, come on in and like check out what's here. Nobody even I don't think anyone knows what the best plate looks like in the buffet. Like cafeteria Catholic is a term, and it's like well, there are certain things you have to take, and then there's a bunch of stuff you don't. And in that sense, you can be a cafeteria Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? You can believe in Fatima and disregard most of the other apparitions. Yeah. You can just disregard all of them.
Yeah.
You can, you know what I mean? It's just why I'm just saying the easier you make it, and the more permissive you are. Mm-hmm. Why would that be a bad thing?
Well, I mean, the impression I get is that like what people have been worried about in the past, and like, to some degree what people are worried about now is just where you draw that line. Because like you can be permissive in what you're asking people to believe or not believe, but presumably there is a point where you're going too far in like what you're allowing people to doubt. Um, and so I think, the fear is that if you're not sort of on, like, basically guarding against um, that line or that kind of drive going too far in a bad direction, that it will. And yeah.
Is that the story though that's happened? That, I mean, isn't the big theme sort of that we've accrued more and more
Mm-hmm.
um, required beliefs, and haven't we over the years become more um,
Mm-hmm.
restricted in what you can sort of, you know, in, go
I don't.
about on your own as far as,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I mean, there you have heresies, they
Mm-hmm.
get refuted, and then
Yeah.
on and on and on until there's, then you have core beliefs, then you have,
Mm-hmm.
the catechism, and then you have the
Mm-hmm.
next catechism. It's like,
Well, I can't. I can't.
how much can you
Yeah.
just keep building on that, and just
Yeah.
at what point does it just become too much, and just,
Well, I think that if what you are accumulating is the truth, then I don't think that there is ever too much. Like, I think it's like, you know, that is not like a heavy burden to bear, especially if it's explained well. And so it's not. I think if
that's
there's,
crazy. There's so,
yeah,
like, every single, like, the truth is,
yeah,
there's so many facets. It's
yeah,
almost infinite, the facets.
yeah,
So why, how is that not too much? People don't have the capacity to
mm-hmm,
process that many facets of the overall truth. If you believe,
mm-hmm,
I thought that was kind of the half the thing, is that, like, you can believe in Christ, you can rely,
mm-hmm,
and and it, and
mm-hmm,
obey the church that he founded,
yeah,
and it doesn't have to be this I don't know,
yeah,
maze,
yeah. Well, I think that's true. Like, and um, I think that it shouldn't be a really complicated thing. Like, it shouldn't be confusing to be Catholic, and I think that if it is confusing, which I think at this point in history it has become more confusing over time in certain ways, like, that's kind of a problem. But I don't think that uh, I don't. So, like, there's kind of different approaches that you could take to that. Like, you could take, the stuff, and I think it is a really important distinction to make between stuff that you kind of have a duty to believe is true, um, like, the Immaculate Conception or something, and stuff that, you know, is kind of private revelation that you don't have any obligation to believe in, like private revelations and that kind of thing. And yeah.
But that is what the church says. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, but I think you are kind of proposing that, well, we should be more stringent. We should be like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, the problem is that we've been trying to appeal to people on the street and ask less of them, and
Yeah.
really what we need to do is the opposite. I think I see that
Mm-hmm.
in in, like, morality, like,
Yeah.
oh, don't worry about that, don't, just relax, don't worry too much about this, and don't fast, don't overdo it. This
Mm-hmm.
undermines the spiritual, you know
Mm-hmm.
I guess, like sacramental theology and all the purpose of what we do, but like when it comes to doctrines and dogmas, I don't think more is necessarily better.
Well,
Because I don't consider it a heroic. I mean, if it's easy for you to believe that Genesis is literally true,
yeah,
then that's not a heroic belief for you. If it's easy, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
If it's
yeah.
and so it's just I'm not really sure that believing precisely having a really perfect view of like these kind of unknowns. I don't see I don't see the virtue in it really. I think there's virtue in obedience, and I think there's virtue in sacrifice and prayer and relying on God.
Yeah.
I don't think there's virtue in having a strongly held opinion about the age of the earth,
Yeah.
or this or that minutia. I don't.
Yeah. I agree. Like I don't think that it's a virtue. Like I don't think that having that truth be available to you is a virtue. I think that's a grace. And I think to me that's kind of like the risk that I would be concerned about, if the
Is it a grace if you just? Is it a grace? I mean, there's grace in from being obedient to the church, but is it actually a grace if you
I think
believe something? Because, I mean, it's not really. I mean, whether or not.
I don't think it's like uh I don't think it is something that you're like personally doing well. I think that there's lots of other sources of grace, but I think that, humans, we're not very smart, anytime that we understand something that is true, um, you know, just the truth is a grace. And I don't think that we should be forcing, like it's kind of like you can't force somebody to be a Christian. You can't force somebody to be baptized. I don't think we should force anybody um, to believe anything, other than the things that we know that they have to believe, to do the basics that have to happen. But I think we shouldn't hide the truth either. Like I think that's the risk, is that if the church, like there's two risks. Like I think one is that people feel like they're forced to have faith in too much, or that it's too confusing, or that kind of like pushes them away. And I think the other extreme would be if the church has things that it has a lot of reasons to believe are true, not in a pushy way, but that information should not be something that we shouldn't ever be ashamed of the truth, basically. And I think that, you know, um, being ashamed of the truth is a risk if people are afraid of putting certain ideas out there because it's too much, for other people to take in some way.
Uh, so I don't think we should be ashamed of the truth or of Jesus.
Yeah.
I don't think that's really the issue for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I think for some people it is.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes there are issues in the church that there's the truth, and then we kind of there are ways that are found to kind of get around it.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's good, but on a lot of these things it's just a matter of people just don't know what makes more sense.
Yeah.
The young earth creationism thing is a good example, because there's really no way to know. Mm-hmm. None of us were there. It's not the church doesn't teach that the Earth is 6,000 years old. At least the church doesn't say that we need to believe that. So if the church taught that and now says that we don't need to believe that, what does that even mean? Um, it, you know,
Yeah.
I don't know that the church did teach that.
Mm-hmm.
If the church did teach that,
Yeah.
then we do have to believe it.
Yeah.
But if the church says we don't have to believe it,
Mm-hmm.
then that must mean that the church didn't teach it.
I think, it's a tricky one because I think that, that's kind of like what I was saying earlier, if it is, if you have good faith, you have good intentions, you're genuinely trying to do the right thing and to do your best, it should not be confusing to be a Catholic. And so there's different ways that you could try, and I think, it is kind of confusing right now. There's different ways you could try and solve that problem. Like one, is you could try and like streamline things a lot. So, you know, um, you're just presenting people with as little information as possible so that it's not confusing. And I think, that makes sense in certain ways, but at the same time, I think that, um, part of the reason that the church exists is to, be a way for graces to come to the earth. And I think the truth is a grace. And I think it's tricky because I think, this is probably somewhat of a debatable one, whether it's, you know, dogma or if the teaching has changed, maybe like kind of similar to the death penalty or whatever. But I think that there are certain uh, things that everybody agrees are core, theologically, spiritually, morally, that um, that the church needs to preserve. And then I think that it's okay to have things where there is a certain amount of, humility where, you know, because I think we want to have the truth like fully revealed to us, like we want to be like, what exactly is it? Especially if it's something important. And I think that the church kind of can do that with like the core things. And then, there's a lot of stuff that there are, spiritual mysteries around, and that is just like uh, reasonable people can disagree, especially if it seems like it's unclear or confusing what the church expects us to think. And so I think that what needs to happen is, instead of people having that be a point of contention between them, uh, or feeling bad because, oh, this person thinks this and I think that, or, is that people need to entertain multiple possibilities simultaneously and not just leave it at that, but kind of like investigate multiple possibilities simultaneously, and sort of see which ones pan out, and I think that
Yeah, but the
is,
problem is
yeah.
the reason that we can't trust like climate science and
Mm-hmm.
you know all these so-called scientists is because they have interests. Or
Yeah.
so why would I trust? I don't trust. Like, I know there's a museum somewhere that's
Yeah.
dedicated to young earth creationism, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like, if you already have an answer that you are looking for,
Mm-hmm.
then I'm not likely to trust the processes you went through to get to that
Yeah.
answer, and I don't really. And it's just like, how important is it at the end of the day? Like, and we have all these things going on. We have transgenderism and abortion, and
Mm-hmm.
we have COVID. Why would we, like, it's just not, it's the last thing on my mind. And when there's,
Yeah.
when there's a really good chance that people are